So I'm so excited to introduce you to someone who I've just met for the first time this morning, but someone who I've heard about so much from my daughter Taryn and Lisa as well over the years. Seraphina Capranos is a clinical herbalist, a homeopath, and a priestess with a practice spanning over 2 decades. As well as being a deeply engaging teacher and speaker, she runs a private practice on a small island in Coast Salish territory. She has a unique blend of gifts that straddle the vast worlds of plant medicine, shamanism, and ritual magic. She's also an herbal medicine teacher with Pacific Rim College. To learn more about Seraphina and her offerings, please visit seraphinacapranos.com, and we will share the links both here and on Facebook. So welcome, Seraphina. We were just talking for a moment, and you were telling me that where you live is actually your property kind of abuts right up to Taryn's property, my daughter Taryn's. And she hadn't mentioned that when I was there last week. She said, I think she might have said she lives over there, but I didn't realize she meant like right over there.
Yeah, it's a really neat synchronicity. So it's pretty sweet how certain people kind of magnetize to each other. And yeah.
Beautiful. Over to you.
All right. So thank you so much again for having me here. This is a great opportunity where I get to talk about my love, which is herbal medicine. And I'm going to focus on it today on the topic of how to nurture, how to soothe, how to ease our nervous system and our body, our well-being in these times. And we're living in trying times, and we're especially living in trying times for folks who are in recovery and feeling the impact of the confluence of our life histories and healing. So I want to focus today on plants, which is one of my loves. As was mentioned in my bio, I work with plants, I work with homeopathy, and I also am a ritualist. And I've been doing all of these things for about 20 years. So just as a brief intro to herbal medicine, herbs are not just the sum of their constituents, they're active components. So some folks might be familiar with the essential oil compounds in plants or the bitter compounds that we taste in things like dandelion root or even coffee. And then the other constituents that we're familiar with might be things like caffeine, right? Those are the parts of plants. But plants are more than just these constituents. They also contain an energy body. They're living beings. Even when they're dried, we're able to draw on and receive the benefit of their more subtle bodies. So I'm going to be kind of bridging the world of the very material, which are those constituents and those active compounds, and also the energetics of plants, which are more of those subtle bodies, which is something I fell into by accident. And I'll just briefly give an intro to my background, because I know some of you are new to me and my work. So I was raised by a mom and dad, and I had my mother's parents, my maternal grandparents, were highly influential in my life. They lived in a small village or came from a small village in Europe. And I was raised with their influence, which was they didn't grow up with a doctor. They didn't grow up with medical care due to the village that they lived in. So they knew the ways of herbal medicine. And that highly influenced my mother. And so I lived in a home and you could say in an ecosystem in my home life where we turned to herbs and natural remedies, not because it was trendy, not because there was any movement related to it, but because that's just what they knew. It was very practical. And my grandparents would often say that learning or knowing the wisdom of plants was a matter of survival for them. It was practical knowledge, what to do for a cough, cold, fever, infection, sore tummy, menstrual pains, injuries, first aid. This is what their lives depended on. And this is true for all of us watching. All of our ancestors came from a time and a place where learning the way of herbal medicine was practical wisdom. So that was the ecosystem, the home life that I grew up in. There were many other things happening in my home life, but that was one positive influence. And then when I was a teenager, I had a serious injury to my spine and I couldn't walk or move much for months. And I went to various practitioners. Some worked, but most didn't. And as a teen, that forced me to look kind of draw upon the skills that I was steeped in as a child and as a young person, and that was herbal medicine. So I used herbs and I dove into herbs. I read books on herbs because I wasn't going to school because I was in so much pain and bedridden. And I was captivated. I fell deeper in love with this art that had been around me and I almost took for granted. It was just something my mom and my grandparents did, but I soaked it up and I ate and gobbled up every book I could read on herbal medicine. And then after high school, I did Tom Brown's survival school and I did all kinds of things. I was exploring. And just to fast track, I then went to herbal school, Emerson College of Herbology, while I was also attending University of Toronto, hoping to do my pre-med and go into medical school. And I was just captivated by herbal medicine. Everything kind of kept pulling me back to this tradition. And then when I was 19, so just about 20 or so years ago, I ended up going to Susan Weed's Wise Woman Center in upstate New York. This is in the late 90s. And it was there that these two worlds bridged, and those two worlds were the magical realm. She initiated some of us into a priestess tradition. And then she was also a mathematician and quite brilliant. So she knew the science of herbs quite well. And so that's where my two loves, kind of my university background, my Susan Weed, WEED. So she has a center called the Wise Woman Center in upstate New York. And that's where my two loves bridged, which was science and the practical application of herbs and medicine, and then also the more mystical tradition. Because what I didn't say is from the age of 14, I began seeing and sensing energy, which gave me incredible anxiety. And I'm going to be talking about anxiety shortly in our presentation. So there I was in my teen years, and unfortunately there was a long period where I wasn't able to do a lot of the things that teens could do, like party and go out and have fun, because I was in pain and I was bedridden. But in those teen years, I was diving into herbal medicine, and then also I was waking up, you could say, spiritually, and I was trying to make sense of the things that I could naturally hear and sense and feel, that you might say is the cultivation of intuition. And but it was disconcerting as a teen when all my friends were doing all the kid things, and there I was learning how to manage energy and make sense of what I was seeing, make sense of what I was feeling, and then exploring my own body as this template for how to heal. So that's what my young years were filled with. That's the short version of the story. So, and then at 20 years old, just when I was getting my energy back, my father, who was only 47, suddenly died. And that was a huge trauma. I was still living at home. And so that was, as you may imagine, just a shock, a heartbreak that fractures a young person's life. Well, I think it fractures anyone at any point in their life if they're close to their parent. So that was a huge trauma. And it was around that time that I had a vision that I was working with a very small a woman that didn't look like anyone I had ever met. I started just having this vision and this dream that showed me in the desert. And I grew up and lived in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So this didn't make sense to me, this landscape that I saw in my dream. But nonetheless, I told a friend that who lived in New York about this dream. And she said, this sounds like this woman named Blade that I've heard of, this healer and this medicine woman and this herbalist. And something just lit up. And there I was, 20 years old, in the middle of a university degree, and I dropped everything. And it was sort of one of those initiatory moments that grief and trauma and devastation can push us on the precipice of great change. And that was one of many of those big moments in my life. So at that age, I packed up, I had a backpack and a guitar, and I bought a plane ticket to New Mexico, Santa Fe. And I thought I'd go for 3 or maybe 6 months. And I ended up staying a year working with this woman named Blade, who was a medicine woman, a shamanic practitioner in the Toltec tradition. and a herbalist. And so I was able to deepen my herbal studies. And so remember, I had my educational background from Emerson College that I began in Toronto. I had done my apprenticeship or part of some journey, some of my practice at Susan Weeds at the Wise Woman Center in New York. And then here I was in the desert of New Mexico working in a one-on-one basis with this woman. And we met almost every day, sometimes once or twice, sometimes literally 5 to 7 days a week. We were working intensively together, both in an internal practice that is set out by the Toltec practitioners. And then I was learning and deepening my practice with herbal medicine. So that's a little bit of my background. And since then, I now live in the Gulf Islands. I live on Salt Spring Island, and I have a clinical practice, which I've had for about 16 or 17 years here. And I work with all kinds of people. And because recovery, as Dawn said, we're all recovering from something. That's a huge body of my work, working with folks who have a history of trauma or abuse, addiction, of wide spectrum of addiction. And I'd say most of us have experienced and are recovering from trauma. So that's a huge focus of my work. And I also teach herbal medicine and the magical ritual arts. So plants, just to come back to what we're all gathered here today to talk about, which is herbal medicine and plants to soothe and to nourish and to reset our nervous system. I want to just begin by saying plants are more than their active compounds, and plants are intelligent in of themselves, and they carry this life energy. So even if this idea is foreign to you or a strange concept, I want you to just think about how you feel when you drink a cup of coffee or when you drink a cup of chamomile tea or black tea. We have an emotional reaction and an emotional response to those herbs. And they can be uplifting. They can make us feel good. They can make us feel inspired or happy, right? So a lot of people say to me, oh, I couldn't live without my cup of coffee. It brings me joy. It helps me feel more alert in my day. So that, yes, that's contributed to the caffeine components in the coffee, but it also is an imprint of the energetic of the plant, right? This is part of the plant's personality. So each thing on earth has its own unique spirit and has its own innate expression, each thing on the earth. So the water has this water, whether it be the ocean or the lake, has this component of soothing us and bathing us. And for many people, water has a relaxing component. You could say that's the water's personality, just like the wind can be stirring and agitating for some or inspiring for others. That's the energetic of the wind. The sun for many is uplifting and gives us pleasure. And for others, the sun is kind of irritating and too much and agitating. And that's part of the quality and the expression of the sun. So all that is just to say that everything on earth has its own personality, has its own virtue, and you could even say has its own medicinal function. And as an earth-based practitioner, that's one way that I relate to the natural world, is everything on earth has its own innate healing function and its own personality. So plants, they animate this expression of the unseen world, which we call the chi or the vital force. And in that expression of the chi or the vital force, it has an ability, plants have the ability to adjust our own vital force and our own being. Whether it be, again, that cup of coffee or that cup of chamomile tea, plants have that ability to impact our nervous system and impact our body. And this is where we then move over to talking about herbs for the nervous system. And that is, they want to share their medicine with us. And you don't have to be a so-called spiritual person. What I'm sharing here has nothing to do with any kind of religiosity or religious way of seeing. This is, if anything, it's relating to the animist way of relating to the natural world. But it's essentially an earth-based practice to just open your consciousness and conceive of the function that plants are here to share their spirit with us. So I'm going to talk about a few herbs in just a moment to give you some specifics that you can work with. But before we do that, I just want you to be thinking about plants as living beings, and they're in relationship with our nervous system. And that's one of the ways that they function. They function by adjusting our nervous system, whether it be that with caffeine, which is an uplifting, it's a stimulating nervous system herb, or something that's relaxing like chamomile tea, which helps downgrade or relax our nervous system. So herbs can do many things, but today we'll just be talking about that stimulating and then that relaxing function. And that's one way that we can relate to the natural world and invite these living beings into our essence to share their essence with us. And that's ultimately how we heal. We heal in partnership and in concert with the natural world, whether we're conscious of it or not. We're healing with the natural world. So I'm going to just change things up. I'm going to share my screen with you. And just so that you can lay your eyes on the images that I'm sharing, I've got some of my favorite plants today to talk about. And as I'm sharing my screen, just allow yourself to receive the medicine of that image if you can. And as you're receiving the medicine of that image, just notice what happens in your body, because sometimes what can happen is depending on our level of sensitivity and our level of openness, through the images alone, we can be receiving the benefit of that plant. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do that right now. All right. So this is the plant Holy Basil, also known as Tulsi. And one of the things that I love most about Tulsi is that it works at helping to it helps to balance what's called the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. That's not something you need to know or memorize, but just to say that it helps to bring down and minimize those high levels of cortisol. So for those of us who have experienced trauma, stress, or we're going through a difficult time in our life, or we're in the heart of our recovery process, stress is one of the pieces that we need to be mindful of, right? And watching and becoming more conscious of. That's something that I work with my clients. So Tulsi, or holy basil, stimulates those brain cells that allows our body to stop holding on to traumatic events. And instead, it allows our body to process them. And one way that I think about it is it allows the body to release those memories, those memories that are lodged in our tissues of those stressful or traumatizing events. So herbs work in this subtle way. We're not talking about the same level of intensity that we might be experiencing when we use any kind of prescription medication. Herbs are working in this subtle and yet profound way at nudging our nervous system, nudging our body to be releasing. And I sometimes think of it like releasing and draining that stress and that trauma from our body. So there's never one explanation for how herbs work. In when it comes to herbal medicine and the science of herbal medicine, of which there's plenty, but we do know that where the brain processes short-term memories and where we experience them in terms of long-term memories is in the hippocampus in the brain. And when we're having flashbacks, or when we are in a time in our life where we're processing a lot of material that has happened, or we're even anticipating the fear of what might be happening in the future, our cortisol levels, our stress hormones, are increasing and bathing our brain essentially in stress hormone. So Tulsi helps to bring down and lower that cortisol level. It helps our body to stop holding and metabolize those traumatic events. And it helps what it does, this is called an adaptogenic herb. So when we are working with adaptogenic herbs, adaptogens help us make sense of stress. So if there's ever been a period of your life where you notice, due to your history, due to your traumatic past, your threshold for stress minimizes over time. And that's something I see a lot for folks who've lived a high stress life. There comes a point where they say, you know what, I can't even handle the smallest level of stress. I can't handle the phone ringing and a deadline and having to make dinner by 6 p.m. Even those daily tasks are now just too much for my nervous system to handle. That is when I think about a herb like Tulsi. So it helps our body adapt to stress. But it doesn't mean that we get to lean on it so that we can do more and more and more stressful things, but it helps to re-educate our nervous system to make sense of what we're needing to process today in today's world, rather than processing and responding to the past. It helps bring us into the present. So this is an adaptogenic herb. It has volatile oils. So volatile oils are those essential oil compounds. And the beauty of the volatile oils in Tulsi, which is a member of the mint family, is it also helps our digestive system function. And so we have in our gut, we have what's called the enteric nervous system, which is sort of like the second brain. And this is where neurotransmitters are created. Indeed, they're actually created in our digestive system. So Tulsi and those lovely volatile oils that naturally exist in this plant, even when it's dried, they help our gut process what's happening in our enteric nervous system, and it improves digestion. So some of you may have heard this idea that our digestive function is the backbone of our immune system. Well, the digestive system is also the backbone of our mental health, right? So when we take care of our digestive system function, what the side effect of that is our mood can be improved. Our stress levels come down some because we're nourishing, you could say, the root of our being, which is our gut, our nervous system that exists in the gut where our neurotransmitters are made. The other lovely thing about Tulsi, like many members of the mint family, they're antimicrobial, they're anti-inflammatory, they have antibacterial function. So they have all these other added benefits because each herb, this is where I love herbal medicine so much. There's an inherent intelligence in herbal medicine. And part of that intelligence is that they're not working on any one part of our body. They're unlike pharmaceuticals in that way. And I'm not down on pharmaceuticals. They have a place. However, there's an elegance to herbal medicine in that when the herbs are working on one part of our body, they're working on others because our body works like this garden, like this ecosystem. And just before we move on to another herb, I just want to share a story of holy basil. I think about one client who came from a really traumatic home and upbringing. And he had a past of sex addiction. He had a lot of health problems, and he came to my doorstep completely crashed, completely burnt out, and in recovery. And I worked with him for many years, and the herb that we kept coming back to over and over was holy basil, also known as Tulsi. And he would say every time he took his cup of tea, he was also abstaining from alcohol. So I gave it to him in a tea form, and I would have him prepared as a really strong tea, like it was nearly black in its color. So we're not just talking about a tea bag here. We're talking about buying it in a bag of raw herb that you can get from a health food store or any online herbal seller. And he would make a thick, strong brew of the tea. And he said every time he would just take even one sip of that tea, he felt his mind become more alert and clear. He said it felt like it brought me into the present moment. And he said, in all the distractions, the rapid thinking, the intrusive thoughts, the guilt for what he did in the past, the fear of the future, all of that noise in his psyche was minimized. And he felt like he was able to come right into the present moment with every sip. And that is this herb. It can work that quickly and that profoundly taken in this form. And then the other thing that he remarked, and I hear this from every one of my clients who works with this herb in any committed way, is the flush of adrenaline minimizes with each sip of the infusion of that strong tea, which we call an infusion. That cortisol, that stress hormone, that adrenaline just comes right down. So the elegance and the beauty, again, of herbs is they can be relaxing. They can bring us back deep into our body, but they're not acting as sedatives. Our minds can be alert. We can be focused on the task at hand. It can pull our attention and those threads of energy from the past and the future right here in the present. And that's what we want, right? That's what we want. And that helps us when we're present, when we're congruent. It helps to pull those disparate or fragmented parts of self back into congruency, into the here and now. And that's the beauty of this herb and these relaxing nerve vines. So that's Tulsi. And I want you, just before we leave this herb, I want you just to notice the rich green of those leaves that might remind us of mint, and those soft, delicate purple flowers. Another member of the mint family is Lemonbalm. And you might be thinking, Lemonbalm, when are we talking about this common herb? We think about it for babies and kids and maybe a nice after tea beverage. But Lemonbalm, again, taken medicinally. And by that, I mean not so much the tea bag. I prefer people go to a health shop and online or in your nearest town and buy the raw, freshly, nicely dried herb, or you can grow it fresh in your garden. And Lemonbalm is also a member of the mint family. And this is a specific one that I use for folks who feel like they're on their last straw. They've got frayed nerves. They might be struggling with anxiety. They might be struggling with heart palpitations. This is one that I use for panic attacks accompanied with heart palpitations, nightmares, hyperactivity. So moving from one thing to the next, you're distracted. You're not able to settle in your body. Maybe you're someone who says, I don't know how to be present. Like, what does that even mean, being present? I hate that expression. Like, I have no frame of reference for being present. So this herb is a good one for that individual. And once again, if you look at this image, it's such a plain, simple looking herb that looks like this weed. But you see, that's once again the elegance of herbs. Some of our most profoundly effective medicinals are common. They are the weeds that grow along the sidewalk. They are the weeds in your backyard. They are the easy herbs that don't require a lot of fuss. They're not necessarily the beautiful, fussy, elegant potted plants that you have to baby so much. These are the wild, reckless ones. They're the edge walkers. These are the herbs that we want to be using. And these are the ones that are our warrior herbs. So Lemonbalm, once again, taken medicinally. So that's that really strong tea prepared almost like a thick black preparation. Or you can be using a tincture, which can be alcohol-based or non-alcohol-based for folks who are abstaining or avoiding alcohol. And again, you can find that easily at a health food store. I use this, I think about this herb also for people who have social anxiety. So again, anxiety, insomnia, panic attacks, heart palpitations, feeling on the edge of your nerves. I am thinking about this right now for a client that I had, a teenager who dropped out of school. They just could not handle the social anxiety of people looking at them. They had this fear based on they were bullied excessively. They ended up falling into a crowd where they were dealing drugs and they were in recovery. And they said, I just can't handle school. Forget it. I've totally dropped out. They were doing their lessons, their schoolwork from home when they had the bandwidth to do so. But one of their concerns is they couldn't focus. They had issues focusing, and they developed this incredible anxiety of people looking at them. They couldn't go to the store. They didn't want to go to any events. They didn't want to go to any of their 12-step circles for fear of people looking at them. And Lemonbalm was the herb that I used for them, because it matched the way in which that they were experiencing their stress. And as a herbalist, that's part of the art of this medicine. We're not just giving somebody a herb that's good for the liver, or a herb that's good for the heart, or a herb that is a sedative for their anxiety. The art part of herbal medicine is we're wanting to match the person to the plant that expresses or is made for their particular concern or threshold that they're crossing in their healing journey. So that's where Lemonbalm comes in. It's for that individual who has who may have panic attacks, particularly relating to social anxiety, people looking at them. There's this nervous tension. They may have even dissociative disorder. And this herb helps like Tulsi, and if you're paying attention to this detail, this little detail, I mentioned that both of them belong to the mint family. And that's part of the elegance of the mint family, is they help bring together and bridge together those disparate parts of self, those parts that may be fragmented. That's where the mint family is so brilliant at bringing our parts together. It's relaxing while also being uplifting. So I just took a deep breath thinking about this, drinking this plant, because it's part of what it does. It helps encourage that deep breath. And every time we take a deep breath, it helps drop us down into the parasympathetic and engage the parasympathetic nervous system. And the parasympathetic nervous system is part of our rest, digest, and heal aspect, a branch of our nervous system. So many of us who have histories of trauma or who are in recovery, our sympathetic nervous system is really used to being engaged. And our sympathetic nervous system is where our adrenaline is kicking in, is where our cortisol levels, our stress hormone is amping up. And when we're in that branch of our nervous system, the sympathetic, the go, 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 the frenetic part of our nervous system, it's responding to apparent threats, right? And I'm sure many of you can raise your hand and say, I've been there. Most of us in the modern world have been there. We're all recovering from something. We all have our traumas and our adverse histories where it's a miracle for some of us that we're alive. And that's due to the strength and the resiliency of our being. And we've had to draw on that sympathetic nervous system a lot in our lives to survive. So Lemonbalm, like the rest of the mint family, they do a great job at just helping give us a deep breath, help us engage the parasympathetic nervous system so that our body can recalibrate. So I want you to think about this herb if you're somebody who relates to social anxiety, if you're somebody who has panic attacks when it comes to anticipatory anxiety. So anticipatory anxiety is anticipating, it's sort of like stage fright, whether it be going to the grocery store, you're like, oh man, can I do this? I need to rally. People might be looking at me. I may have to talk to strangers. Or maybe you suffer from nightmares, and perhaps those nightmares are about being on stage or having to give a presentation, or maybe those nightmares are about showing up for something and you're unprepared, like an exam. I want you to be thinking about this herb. And again, my favorite way to use herbs is simple. Keep it simple. A beautiful cup of strong tea, but again, not so much a flavored beverage, which is what a tea bag is. I want you to be thinking more about getting your herbs from a health shop or buying a herbal tincture or even capsules. And once again, tinctures can be in a base of glycerin, which are alcohol-free. We're not talking so much about essential oils here, but you can also if you have experience or you have a practitioner. I know Taryn is a specialist in essential oils, so you can be working with the Lemonbalm essential oil as well. And then our next herb is Motherwort, and I love Motherwort so much. Look at that beautiful photo. Look at the unique structure of the leaf. And the leaf has 3 prongs or 3 points to it. And in the old priestess cultures of which I'm initiated, they talk about Motherwort being appropriate for women in any stage of life. So maiden, mother, and crone. And some relate those 3 prongs to the goddess, showing us that Motherwort is useful for all stages of life. And that includes children as well, by the way. And just to hop back, if you're pregnant or if you're nursing, you can be using Tulsi, holy basil. You can be using holy basil I would say keep it to 1 cup a day. And then Lemonbalm is also safe, again, keeping to 1 cup of the herb a day. I wouldn't necessarily be using the essential oils in pregnancy, but you can be using some of the glycerate-based tincture, that's the alcohol-free tincture, or you can be using some of the tea. Motherwort, I would not recommend in pregnancy, and I wouldn't use it in nursing as well. And one of the reasons I wouldn't be using motherwort in pregnancy is because it's called an emmenagogue. And what that means, it's a fancy clinical term that means it encourages menstruation. So it has a downward movement to the uterus. Now, if you have heavy periods, I also wouldn't be using this herb when you're menstruating. But you can be using this herb any other time of the month. It is considered safe. All the herbs I'm talking about today are considered safe. And if you're thinking, well, if they're so safe, how come I can't use them in pregnancy or nursing? That's more of a cautionary. It doesn't mean that they have a toxicity effect. It just, we're wanting to use them with care. What you also may be noticing is similar to Tulsi, motherwort has these elegant, you can sort of see their purpley blue flowers and they're delicate. And that's customary of the mint family. Once again, this is a member of the mint family. That's my theme today because the mint family has this very unique property of relaxing us, bringing us back into the congruency of our body and our nervous system. But they also have this uplifting and mental clarity, and they help mend together those fragmented parts of self, right? So motherwort is its main signature or gift, you could say, is assisting us in setting boundaries, both in traumatic situations and in daily life. So motherwort has this ability to help bring us back into our body, much like Tulsi and Lemonbalm. However, I think about motherwort specifically when we've crossed our own boundaries or we're in a process or a pattern of codependency. And that process of codependency has burnt us out. So motherwort teaches our nervous system in rebalancing and rebuilding healthy boundaries, right? And that's significant in the recovery process, is learning how to establish healthy boundaries. What are healthy boundaries? How can we even make sense of what that means? Naturally, herbs are not a replacement for working with a qualified therapist or coach or mentor in recovery, though I see herbs as can be an incredibly important and useful adjunct when working with a qualified practitioner. And so when I say motherwort is helping us helping educate, re-educate our nervous system in healthy boundaries. This isn't a mystical, ephemeral concept. This is literal. And literal in the sense of the herbs are truly teaching and rewiring our nervous system. So what that means is in clinic, what I'll hear someone say is, well, I can think about one client I've worked with this herb with them extensively, and they have young children. They had a partner which they later divorced that was demanding and highly codependent on them. And what they were noticing as they were taking this herb on an ongoing basis, they said, literally, it's like my body feels wired. I can't do what I used to do. I can't continually say yes to these people. I can't continually let my teenage son verbally abuse me anymore. I literally, it's like something in me has shifted. And that's what I listen for when I'm working with someone clinically. I'm listening for those. It's like my nervous system just knows differently now. It's instinctual. We're talking on a deep subconscious level. These herbs are helping rewire our nervous system. So we're not needing to be in charge of the process, right? We're not even talking about a fully conscious process. When we're using herbs, this is happening on it's working on the level of the nervous system being rewired. It's working on that deep enteric nervous system level where the gut, our second brain, and our brain up here in our head is being rewired sort of in the background while we're taking these herbs. And how this is possible, because some of you might be thinking, how is this even possible? It sounds so mystical. How it's possible is that we've co-evolved with plants. We have an ancient relationship with plants. Our bodies are designed to understand the language of plants. Our lives literally depend on plants. It's what we eat. Our breath, literally, we get our oxygen from the green world. So our bodies are deep, the deep wisdom that lives in our ancestral blood and bones and memory know what to do. They know how to make sense of the information plants are giving us. So Motherwort is deeply relaxing. I use this for sleep, especially if I've had a day where I've been giving. I feel like I've extended past my own boundaries and I'm flatlined at night. Maybe I've been working with 12 or even up to 20 people in a day. Which is more than my usual, but maybe there's been a lot of emergency or urgent calls. I will be drawing on Motherwort, and it's a beautiful sleep aid. It's also a specific for heart palpitations. I use it in patients with cardiovascular concerns as well. I don't recommend that you self-prescribe in that manner, but that's just some information for you and showing you how special this herb is for the nervous system and relaxing our nervous system, helping re-educate our nervous system to remember what healthy boundaries even means. I know we're coming up close to the end of our time, but I do want to also mention just a few others, and that is Skullcap. Once again, I want you to notice how similar it looks to the other herbs that I've shown you. And also it has that purple flower, although the structure is a little bit different. And you've guessed it, it's also a member of the mint family. And the Skullcap is specific for the hamster wheel mind, or if your mind is stuck on something, or you've got intrusive thoughts, or there's a thought, a negative, self-criticism, or maybe you're obsessing about something maybe you said yesterday, or you're fixating it. This is for rumination. When we're stuck on something, we're overthinking, we're ruminating, and we want help out of that loop, out of that persistent, out of those, whatever that persistent thought cycle is, or whatever that hamster wheel is. This is a beautiful herb to come off that hamster wheel. And this is also a sleep aid, right? So you can even combine it with Motherwort, or you can combine any of the herbs that I'm talking about today. You can combine them together because they are so beautiful. They work beautifully together. Once again, you can find this in a tea. Just remember, we want to prepare it medicinally or therapeutically. And to do that, you want that strong concentration. You want that strong cup of tea. It is quite bitter. Now, many herbalists feel that many of our modern day ailments are a result of not enough bitter in our diet, or not enough bitter in our medicinal repertoire. So if you can withstand the bitter taste or flavor, I highly encourage that you actually taste your herbs, because we have taste receptor sites on our tongue. So when we taste those herbs, it initiates a response. Skullcap is relaxing. As I mentioned, it's a sleep aid, but specifically we're using this one for overthinking, persistent thoughts, intrusive thoughts. So if you're thinking about self-harm, or you're thinking about wanting to reach for a substance that's not where you really want to go, but a lot of those intrusive thoughts are popping up, and you want to break that cycle, this can be a tremendous ally in breaking that pattern, breaking up those persistent thoughts. And then, like the others, you can go ahead and find these in a tincture form. There's non-alcoholic forms, which are based in glycerin. And then the last two that I want to mention just before we wrap up are Hawthorn, which is a member of the rose family, and then of course our beloved rose, right? So look at that. Just take a moment to think about how this image makes you feel when you look at a rose, right? So there's a softening, there's a tenderness, there's the many layers and bloom and of tender, delicate layers of this plant, just as we are made up of tender, delicate, complex layers in our being. And then its cousin is the hawthorn flower. And look at that beautiful blossom. And these are the berries of the hawthorn. So we see the berries of the hawthorn and then the blossom. And that's a picture I took in spring when the hawthorn berries bloom. So hawthorn and rose I like to use together, and they combine well with skullcap or motherwort or Lemonbalm, or Tulsi, holy basil. So you can be using all of these together in a gorgeous cup of tea. You can make your own blend by going and buying these herbs at a herb shop. And blending them together. And that's how you can customize your own blend, or you can find them in a tincture form, or even you can sometimes buy them in a syrup form. So once again, the hawthorn, now as I say, I've talked about the mint family. This is the rose family, hawthorn and rose. And they are a fantastic duo for nervous system health, particularly where there's heartbreak or there's feelings of loss, feelings of loneliness, feelings of abandonment. So if you're working through those layers of trauma, if you're working towards building that congruency in your nervous system and in your body, please consider bringing in the Rose family, the Hawthorn and the Rose, to help mend that heart. And especially the Rose where there's been any sexual abuse or trauma that you're also processing. So I like to add that in if you're wanting to bring some love and pour that cup of love back into your body and to regrow the sensation or regrow the healing and the memory in your body to that being of a vibration of love. So that's the Hawthorn and the Rose, a nice addition that I like to bring in where there's been any kind of abuse or heartbreak or loss or abandonment. So I'm going to stop my share and come back on screen and just to check in, see if there's been any questions or comments.
Yes, we've got lots of questions. First of all, thank you so much. That was just amazing. Do herbs take a couple of uses to work for your body to get used to them?
Not always. Sometimes it can be immediately. So where I've used Motherwort, for example, in heart palpitations or sudden panic attack, it can take minutes, 5 to 10 minutes. So yeah, it can be really quick.
Wow, wonderful. So we have some questions about herbs for menopause, which, there's a few of us who are kind of in that age category. Mm-hmm. So just kind of general about menopause and also specifically around sexual issues related to menopause.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's tons, a wide repertoire of herbs for menopause. So definitely I highly recommend folks reach out to a practitioner because herbs can make menopause full of grace, full of ease. Pertaining to the herbs that I spoke about today, so menopause can manifest differently for every woman, of course, and every body. Some of the common, I don't know if there was something specific here that the person wanted to ask, but in terms of sexual function and ease and vaginal tissue and dryness and vaginal atrophy, there's lots to bring some juice and life to the area. Menopause is not a disease. It's a transitional phase. And there are herbs that can grace that transition. So just briefly, I'll just say you want herbs that don't just balance hormones. Menopause is not estrogen. It's not about estrogen deficiency. It's about the body finding its equilibrium again. And so I will just say Motherwort is a great herb for folks where there's been heart palpitations or stress or anxiety, because that can happen through the transition of menopause. But just briefly, yes, there's lots of herbs.
Great. Do you offer teachings about plant medicine? Somebody's saying, I'm looking for training to be able to make my own tinctures and remedies at home.
I do. That's one of the major primary things I do. So I offer a 6-month online herbal apprenticeship. Registration is going to open next month, and it's extensive. You will learn how to make all your medicines. You'll learn how to work with herbs on the very practical, functional level. If you want to end up working with clients, it will prepare you well to start your journey on that. And then I also go into more of the specifics, the mind, body, spirit aspect of plants as well. So you can check out my website there. Yes.
Great. How do you use the tincture form? Do you add it to regular tea?
Tincture, you can use the drops directly on the tongue or just in a tiny little water. So a tincture is pre-made. There's no fuss. You literally purchase the tincture and then you can put those drops right on the tongue.
Great. I have a few questions too, but I want to make sure that I get everybody else's. Oh, so somebody's I'm not sure if she's in Canada. Oh, she's in the United States. So somebody's asking a question about farm suggestions for bulk herb ordering.
Farm suggestion? Is that what I heard?
Yeah. Like if you're in the US, do you have somewhere where you would recommend to order bulk?
Yes, absolutely. So if you're in the United States, I recommend pacificbotanicals.ca, or I'm sorry, .com, pacificbotanicals.com. That's for fresh herbs. I also recommend that you Google your county or your state or your town, and I bet you there's some herbal seller near you. And then the other company that is awesome for dried preparations, you can buy tinctures, you can buy the bulk tea, is mountainroseherbs.com. That's mountainroseherbs.com. They're located in Oregon, but they ship everywhere in the United States and they're really quick.
That's amazing. Just so share a little bit of information. So Lisa, who we know as Basil Lisa in our Facebook group, and who is an amazing member of our team. She's our community engagement specialist. She has been studying community herbalism and is one of your herbal apprentices.
Yes, she is.
And Taryn is also studying with you.
Yeah, which is so exciting. They're both beautifully gifted women. I feel so lucky to have them as my participants in my course.
Yeah. And Taryn's also studying with Pacific Rim, where you also did training.
Yeah,
right.
That's where I teach. I didn't do my training at Pacific Rim, but I do teach there.
Oh, I get you. Okay. Sorry. I misunderstood.
Okay. No problem.
Okay. Migraines.
Migraines. Yeah. So much to do for migraines. Lots and lots. So the herbs that I mentioned here today, I would look to Motherwort. That's a beautiful one for migraines. And I would also be looking at Lemonbalm for migraines. Migraines are sometimes come from the liver, which is our master organ. So you want herbs that what Lemonbalm and Motherwort do is they cool the liver function. And they also cool that heat. Migraines are like uprising heat if we speak from an energetic or functional level. So you want to be using that. The other herbs are, and I'll put that in the chat, is feverfew for migraines, and then also yarrow for migraines, and butterbur. So there's some great herbs that you can be using.
Wonderful. And someone's just reminding us that many tinctures are prepared with alcohol. So as you mentioned, Seraphina, you want to look for the ones that are not made with alcohol.
You betcha. Yeah. And those are called glycerates. Yeah.
Glycerates. Okay. Can blue agave syrup be used to temper the bitter taste of the tea?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You can use honey, you can use maple syrup, you can use blue agave, you can use stevia, monk's fruit, anything. Yes, you can.
And it doesn't do anything chemically to weaken the effect of the herb?
No, it won't weaken the effect. However, as a herbalist, we do like folks to attempt to train their palate to become familiar with bitter and like bitter even a little bit, because what bitter does is it helps to send those signals to our gallbladder and our liver to calm and cool and have that anti-inflammatory effect. So yes, I don't want folks to suffer. I want them to enjoy their beverages. So yes, honey, any sweetener is good.
Not one is not better than the other.
No, it's a personal preference. I mean, if you're needing to watch your blood sugar levels, you might want to go with the ones that are easier on your pancreas or in terms of the glycemic level. So those folks who are controlling blood sugar will know what those are. It's just a matter of preference.
Okay. What about muscle? This is my question. What about muscle inflammation?
Yeah. So all of the herbs today are going to be your good friend. Yeah. Those are all great combinations. So muscle tension, muscle pain, you want Motherwort, especially you want Skullcap, particularly. So you can use white willow bark for muscle pain. Herbs are brilliant for pain and inflammation. They're brilliant. The piece I do want to add here is you want to be taking herbs regularly. Like I said earlier, it's about re-educating your nervous system, and they're about teaching your body to move from one pattern into a new pattern, right? So if you can take them regularly, you'll benefit greatly.
Well, I just happen to have a daughter who can get me all set up with herbs once she's kind
There
of
you go.
like qualified, right?
Yeah.
When I had a very bad cough last year, pre-COVID, she brought me some amazingly not tasty things. When you're talking about bitter, I do remember, yes. So there was some real bitterness, but they worked. So they definitely, I'm definitely open to it. I think anything that we could do naturally. Last question for me. Is there anything kind of for for cravings. So say a person is craving maybe their substance, or maybe they're craving some food, or I don't
Yeah.
know, just wondered about craving.
Yeah, absolutely. The short answer is yes, resounding yes. And again, not what a lot of modern folks want to hear, but bitter. Bitter is the most prevalent taste in nature on the planet. So think about that for a minute. Like bitter, life energy wants us to get acquainted with bitter. So often when we have a craving, it can come from a few different places. Obviously, there's the trauma, there's many places, trauma response, old memories, but largely it can be our blood sugars out of balance. It could be our blood sugars low, spiking low, or spiking high. So we're wanting something to mediate or balance our energy field, and our pancreas. So bitter, if we can put something bitter in our tea, have a bitter tea, for example, not horribly bitter where you're like, why am I doing this? But that can re-educate our nervous system and balance our blood sugar. So I highly recommend a bitter tea, and then drink a lot of water.
Great.
Yeah.
I think we have time for just one more before we close up here. So somebody's asking, if I'm wanting to explore remedies specific for my constitution and life experience, should I seek out the support of an herbalist or a naturopath, or both?
Yeah, great question. So I would definitely recommend the support of either a herbalist or a naturopath. A naturopath, they work with multiple modalities. So they'll look at your diet. They might give you some supplements, some vitamins. They might do blood work with you. Whereas a herbalist is focusing specifically on herbs. So if you're wanting specifically herbal formulations and you're drawn to this modality, then I would seek out a qualified herbalist. You want a clinical herbalist who has that training. But if you're wanting more extensive kind of medical support, you might want to reach out to a naturopath.
Great. Well, it's just been lovely. I could listen to your voice quite all day. Do you do meditations? Do you do guided?
I do actually. Yeah. I do meditations, and yes, I do all that. Yeah.
Well, that's amazing. So we've shared your website. Everyone is saying what a lovely voice you have and how grateful they are to you. And this has been a great, excellent, wonderful presentation. So I really do thank you so much for your time. We're so grateful to everyone who takes time out of their busy lives to come and share the information with us that we need, to help heal and heal and grow in our own recovery. So thank you, Seraphina. It's really been delightful to meet you. I look forward to this pandemic being over and visiting with Taryn and perhaps visiting with you at the same time.
So. Yeah, I'd love to have you both over for a cup of tea.
It sounds like you have some tea. Sounds like you have some tea there.
I do.
So thank you. And thank you everybody else for joining us. Next week, I believe I have to check with Lisa to make sure we've confirmed, but I believe that we're going to be having somebody visit with us to talk about binge eating disorder, which will be remarkably interesting as well. And for anybody else who doesn't know much about us, we meet on Zoom twice a day in this time period, as well at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern. And most of the gatherings are sharing circle type gatherings where we have a recovery coach, a certified professional recovery coach lead the conversation, usually topic focused. Just wonderful, wonderful gatherings where you can come and you don't have to turn your video on, you don't have to share. You can just kind of bask in the warmth and the wisdom of quite a few women. I think in our morning calls, we usually have about 60 and in our evening over 100. So you're welcome to join us there. More information about that and everything else that we're doing is on our website at www.sherecovers.org. So thank you again, Seraphina, and thanks everybody. Thank you, Lisa and Taryn, for being behind the scenes. And let me just make sure I'm not missing anything from these messages. Lisa says, yes, it's binge eating disorder with a guest from Eating Recovery. And everything else is there. Oh, so someone's asking if there will be a replay. Better than that, this will live forever on our Facebook page. So if you're here in the webinar, which you are, because that's where you asked the question, if you go to She Recovers Facebook public page, you will see this and it'll stay there. All of our talks do, and they eventually get edited and put up on our YouTube channel. So you can find our previous Mental Health Mondays, or at least some of them. We're trying to get as many up as we can on our She Recovers YouTube channel. So Again, thanks very much, Seraphina and everybody. And I hope everybody has a great rest of your day and a wonderful week.